Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is exercise. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb exercise used is to mean to engage in physical activity. And this physical activity is generally done for one's health or their fitness. It might be to stay in good health, or it might be to improve one's health or fitness. This is probably the most common way that you'll hear this verb used. A second way you might hear the verb exercise used is to put something into action, practice, or use. A little later in this video, I'm going to have a few example sentences that tie back to this second definition of the verb. A third way you might hear the verb exercise used is to mean to worry or to make uneasy. This particular usage is not very common, but if you're in college, you might encounter this usage in some older literature. You should know that exercise is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're going to drop the E and then add ing to form exercising. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. The base verb, exercise, ends in this voiced Z sound. So our past tense ending is going to make a D sound. Exercised, exercised. You'll be happy to know that I don't have any additional meanings for you with phrasal verbs, so that's going to allow us to focus on making sentences in the simple present and the present perfect. Let's start with the simple present. When we use this verb tense, we use it to describe habits or routines. We'll also use it to discuss facts and even our feelings at the moment. The thing to remember about the simple present is that the structure is going to differ based on the subject. So if the subject is I, you, we, or they, the verb is the same as the base verb. So you don't need to make any spelling changes when the subject is I, you, we, or they. If the subject is he, she, or it, though, you need to add an S to the base, to the end of the verb. And you can see that in this example sentence. She exercises every morning before work. So again, this is describing someone's habit or routine. So they are engaged in physical activity for their health or fitness. Now, if you want to make a negative sentence in the simple present, we're going to use do not and then the base verb, and that will be with the subjects I, you, we, or they. Or if our subjects are he, she, or it, we'll use does not and then the base verb. Here's another example. We don't exercise the dogs enough. So here, again, this is connected to health and fitness, but the health and fitness of an animal. So if you're a pet owner, you probably need to know, or probably already know, that you need to give your animals physical activity for their health and well-being. If you want to ask a yes or no question in the simple present, you should start with do or does, whichever one matches our subject, and that subject comes next, and then we'll use the base verb. Here's another example sentence. Do you exercise regularly? So here I'm asking someone about their habit or their routine. I want to point out, again, we're only adding an S to the base verb in the affirmative when our subjects are he, she, or it. That's sometimes a little tricky to remember for folks. Now let's take a look at the present perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about an action that started in the past and it continues into the present, Or we use it to describe an action that occurred at some point in the past tense, but we don't really know when. Many times I call this the indefinite past. So we don't know, was it last week? Was it 10 years ago? And that might just not matter. The structure for making an affirmative sentence in the present perfect is to use have or has. Right? So if our subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use have. And if our subject is he, she, or it, we'll use has. And then we want to use the participle form of the verb. Here's an example sentence. The teachers have exercised their influence over the students. So this particular usage or the meaning of the sentence is going to tie back to that second definition of the verb exercise we looked at earlier, as will the next two examples. So if I want to make a negative present perfect sentence, I need to insert not after have or has. You might hear some speakers use the contraction forms haven't or hasn't. Sometimes students tell me they find it more challenging to say contraction. So no, you do not have to use the contraction form. I like to teach it so that my students can better recognize it when they're listening to other speakers. So let's take a look at a negative present perfect sentence. He hasn't exercised his right to vote in many years. So again, tying back to that second definition of the verb. And if I want to make a yes or no question in the present perfect, I'm going to start with have or has, whichever word matches my subject, which comes next, and then I'll use the participle form of the verb. Have they exercised good judgment? So have they used good judgment is really what that sentence means. Now, let's take a few minutes to look at some words that are related to our verb exercise. The first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. Like our verb, the noun can have a number of different usages or meanings. We're going to look at just 5 to keep it a little shorter and simple. So the first way we can use the noun exercise is to refer to activity that requires physical effort, and that is typically done for health and fitness. So this noun usage ties back to our first definition of the verb very nicely. Right? So you might hear someone ask the question, what's your favorite type of exercise? This could be walking, running, swimming, biking, playing a particular sport, lifting weights, etc. There's so many different forms of exercise. A second way to use this noun is to refer to a military drill or some military training. Here's an example of this meaning in a sentence. The Philippines and U.S. will hold joint military exercises this week. So again, this doesn't mean there's like an actual war or a battle. They're practicing, essentially. A third way to use the noun exercise is to refer to a task or an activity that is done to practice or test a skill. I tend to use this noun often when I'm teaching and referring to some sort of activity that's going to help my students practice a particular skill. Here's an example. Let's do these exercises to practice prepositions. So this might be a sentence some of my students have heard me say, and the idea here is we're going to do a particular activity that checks to see if we understand which preposition to use in particular situations. A fourth way to use the noun exercise is to refer to a ceremony. It's really common to hear this noun form in connection to graduation ceremonies, and you'll see that in my next sentence. Commencement exercises will be held on Saturday, May 15th. This is a sentence you might see a college or university use to announce when they'll be holding graduation ceremonies. A fifth way to use the noun exercise is to mean the use or application of a faculty write, or process. This particular usage connects back to our second definition of the verb. So here's an example. In tomorrow's class, we'll talk about the free exercise of religion. This might be a sentence you hear a political science professor say in regards to a topic that's going to be covered in a future lecture. The next word we're going to look at is the noun exerciser. This is just a person who exercises. Here is an example of this noun in a sentence. Exercisers are returning to group fitness classes. So when the pandemic started over a year ago, many people were uncertain how to engage in physical effort for their health and fitness because their routines were disrupted. But now things are slowly getting back to things we knew in the past. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have